Hello and welcome back to the next session of our seated exam preparation for language paper 1 and paper 2. Today we will be discussing some of the key points which are remaining from our language paper 1 and paper 2 syllabus. So now let us look at the topics that we will be discussing today. So in today's discussion, we will be covering three major concepts. The first one is about teaching learning materials, specifically to language learning. The next one is evaluation of comprehension and also proficiency in various language skills. How do we assess, how do we test, how do we evaluate these language skills? That is what we will be looking into in today's session. And the last one would be the remedial teaching. So, we will look at all of these concepts, a few exemplar questions which have come in our previous year's heated examinations. So, now let us move into the first topic, that is teaching learning materials. So, what are teaching learning materials? The materials which the teachers use in the classroom to enhance and support their teaching so that the learning outcomes of the learners can be achieved easily or supported. So all of these teaching learning materials, and they are also called as learning teaching materials nowadays. So all of these, or they can also be called as teaching aids. They were earlier called as teaching aids or learning resources. So all of these TLMs or LTMs which we bring into the classroom to support our teaching, to enhance learners' learning experience and to make sure that they are being supported throughout. As we already know, we have diverse learners in our classrooms. Their learning styles are different, their learning preferences are different. So, to make learning better, to have a concrete learning experience, we use teaching learning materials. So, why we should be using TLMs? Now, let us look at some of the key points to remember for seated examination. The first one is it makes learning interesting. A lot of the times learning can become monotonous or teacher centered, or it will not feel authentic sometimes or engaging for that matter. So what we need to do is we will bring in certain TLMs which will grab the attention of the students and also it will sustain the curiosity in the lesson. So the next one is encourages active participation. So there are various TLMs which the students can also participate in, they can use it, they can handle the TLMs. What this will do is their involvement is more, and instead of being passive listeners, the learners will become an active participant in their own learning and construction of knowledge. That is why it is important to use TLMs. The next one is improves understanding. The TLMs, it will help us to concretize subjects and certain various abstract ideas or difficult concepts which may not be able to understand otherwise. With the help of this, we will be able to retain whatever we have learned. That is what is our next reason. It enhances retention. What students see, what they hear, and what they do, they will remember for a longer time instead of just listening to it alone. If they are having more than one sense organs being involved, it will be better for students' retention. It also appeals to multiple senses. When we talk about visual or auditory or kinesthetic learners, they require their learning to be in consonance of their learning preferences. Some learners learn better when they listen to a teacher teaching, and then this audio of hearing and processing information, that is how they remember things. Whereas some learners would prefer seeing diagrams, seeing visuals, and looking at them will help them to retain the information for a longer time. There are some learners who would like to manipulate or use their kinesthetic skills, actually get involved physically and motor skills to learn better. So only when they are playing or they are getting involved actively in the classroom, they will learn better. So we need to remember all of these things when we are talking about planning of our lessons and using the appropriate TLMs for our learners. So TLMs, it will also support language development, because in languages there is a lot of skill development that is needed. We discussed all the 4 LSRW skills, which is in language learning. So when we talk about these skills, they can be enhanced with the use of various teaching learning material. So it will improve listening, speaking, reading and writing skills of the learners. So a good TLM will make the teaching effective, it will make the learning meaningful and the classroom joyful. So the learning process will not be passive and dull, it will be interactive, it will be active. So these TLMs are not just teaching aids, they are learning enablers that create better understanding and better learning outcomes in our classrooms. Moving on to the various kinds of teaching learning materials. So they are classified under the 3 categories specifically for language learning. So TLMs can be classified on the basis of sense channel primarily used and the mode of presentation. The first one is audio aids. So these materials, they are appealing to the sense of hearing. For example, radio. It will provide us with authentic listening experiences. It will help the learner to hear and know the correct pronunciation of various words. It will also enhance the fluency while we are speaking. The second one is a tape recorder. It will help us to listen to various lessons. So these are pre-recorded. We will record certain audios and keep it, and as and when we want, we can listen to it again. So these can be used in order to learn some songs, in order to pick up dialogues, and also for us to practice and listen to it again and again and then practice. The next one is a lingua phone. This is specifically used in order to improve our speaking skills in a particular language. So when we use this, it is useful for repeating a particular audio again and again and to grab the intricacies of various languages. The next one is a language laboratory. So many of our schools are now having language labs as well. So what it does is it will provide us with controlled practice of listening skill, speaking skills through individualized or even group activities. So next classification is the visual aids. So visual, it is basically appealing to our sense of sight. So there are various examples of visual aids like the chalkboard or like the blackboard that we use in our classrooms. So whatever the teacher creates, whatever the teacher writes on the blackboard will also give a visual imagery to the students and help them to learn better. The next is a chart. When you present various language structures or certain grammar rules with examples or certain vocabulary, words and their meanings, in form of a chart, the child will be able to remember it better because it looks attractive and it is present there. So when we look at it again and again, it will help us to retain that information in our memory. We can also use various pictures when we are trying to help them build vocabulary. We can use various flashcards when it comes to introducing certain words. When we want to see the spellings and quick revision of certain topics, we can use maps. It will help us to teach various vocabulary related to a particular place and its culture. So if we want to tell various languages spoken in various parts of India, we can show it on the map and then associate the language with that. So when you are giving the spatial orientation or the place of where this language is spoken, it will help for the child to connect these and remember better. We can also use certain models. This will help us to simplify various complex ideas. The next one is audio visual aids. So this will have a combination of both the hearing and sight. So it will appeal to both of these, and for example, television, movies or films, and it will also be computer assisted language learning. So what happens in this is you are trying to use both hearing as well as sight. When we do that, you see the inputs are drawn more at a better pace and the students will understand better because they can associate the imagery in front of them and also the audio that they are listening to. So it will provide us with both visual and auditory experience. And then when we are watching certain movies and films, it will help us to enhance the cultural awareness and then also critical thinking. When they're critiquing a movie, a particular film that they have just watched, and we ask them to give a review in a critical manner, it will also enhance their critical thinking abilities. When it comes to computer assisted learning, it talks specifically of certain programs. It will have certain multimedia softwares. It will help us to enhance language learning by practicing the skills. Now let us look at it further in detail. So the audio aids in language teaching, it will help us to, we hear what is being said, then we understand, we speak, and we also communicate. So these audio aids, the various uses of it would be, it will provide us with authentic listening experience. It will give our learners the exposure to various accents, pronunciation, and real life language use. It will develop general and cultural awareness among the learners. When it comes to a tape recorder, it helps in listening to songs and also dialogues and again in a repeated manner. So it helps to develop listening comprehension. The lingua phone, it enables individual listening and speaking practice. So the child can listen to specific pronunciation, intonation individually, and it will also give you an immediate feedback. When it comes to the language lab, it is a controlled and systematic practice in order to improve your language skills. So you can see a few of the example activities that we can do in our classroom. We can make our students listen to certain news and then ask questions on that. The learning cannot happen just by exposure to the TLM. The teacher has to plan an extended activity or a worksheet or certain questions to check what they have learned with the use of the TLM. That is what becomes important here. Coming to the visual aids, so these aids will help us to see, understand, remember, and eventually being able to express. So these appeal to the sense of sight and help learner to understand, organize, and then retain the information easily. Where we can use these, some of the examples are when we are trying to learn grammar, when we are trying to see sentence structures and trying to see which particular grammatical rule should be used where. So for us to be able to know that, it is better if we are giving a visual also along with what we are teaching. And when it comes to pictures and flashcard, it becomes very important for us to remember that whenever we are associating a word with a picture, the retention of it is better. So the various benefits of using visual aids would be, it will enhance our understanding and retention, it encourages the active participation, it supports various learning styles, it also saves teaching time, because if you have to explain some abstract concepts without a visual, it becomes very difficult. When we try to use simultaneously with visual imagery and also are teaching our learners how to use it in the classroom or speak, another benefit of this would be, it makes the learning interesting and more meaningful. Now coming to the audio visual aids. So if we see audio aids in isolation, visual aids in isolation, and then audio visual aids together. When you are talking about audio visual aids together, we can see the effectiveness of it will be all the more, because we are addressing both the seeing and hearing aspect here. So the audio visual aids will combine the sounds and the visuals to make language learning more meaningful and effective. So we can see various videos which will have the video and as well as the audio. So when both of it is coming together, it will make it easier and quicker for us to understand. So we can use video conferencing and we can invite online speakers to discuss things with our students. We can try to use various multimedia software where the children are able to interact, where they can practice their pronunciation. So these can be some of the ways we can use audio visual aids. It has profound benefits, like it will will help in enhancing the understanding and retention. It increases students' engagement and motivation. And also, we can bring in various abstract and even real life experiences in the form of audio and visuals here. So it will support different learning styles of our learner. Thus, this becomes a very important kind of TLM that we can use in language learning. Moving on, we have computer assisted language learning. I have separately highlighted this here because when it comes to the CTET examination, it also asks questions related to educational technology or how computer assisted language learning is one of the prominent changes which has benefited language learning a lot. So, when we talk about computer assisted language learning, it will integrate technology and language learning in order to enhance our teaching experience, our learners' learning experience, and thereby their communication and language learning outcomes. So, there are various components of CAL, that is multimedia learning. So, it will have various kind of media present, like audio visual aids, it will have images, and like example could be a set of videos which are selected by the teacher. A digital presentation is also uploaded in the system for the children to experience it themselves. It also gives an opportunity for interactive practice. It will help in communication and also collaboration learning in the classroom and also beyond the classroom. Whenever you are giving activities related to CAL, you need to understand that the child can learn on its own pace and also experience it even when you are not present there. You just need to program it with the preferences of the child. And then we need to have access to authentic materials, so we will be able to identify what are some of the online learning articles which the students can refer to. And because of these authentic materials, the child will be able to learn better. This CAL also gives an opportunity for personalized learning. So these are some of the important things which we need to remember when it comes to CAL. And then it will also develop digital literacy because computers are being involved here. So CAL makes language learning interactive, accessible, and effective by using technology to build knowledge, skills, and confidence among our learners. So let us now look at what are the characteristics. When we're talking about TLMs, we need to remember that when it comes to teaching of language, our textbooks are a key resource, a key learning material that we use. So what should be the characteristics of a good textbook? The textbook should inform us, it should have the right information, it should be engaging, it should support the learners' learning material and also their learning process, and then it should inspire the learner and have particular aspect of creativity also. So the characteristics of a good textbooks are accurate and reliable. The textbook needs to have correct content, it should be up to date, it should be clear and understandable because the language should be simple so that the child and the teacher both can benefit simultaneously, because a lot of the times our children are reading our textbooks while they are away from the school as well. So it should be in simple language so the child themselves can understand. It should be a well organized content, there should be coherence, it should be developmentally and age appropriate. How a particular concept is learned, at which age it will be appropriate. Based on these principles, we should develop the order in which the difficulty increases in our textbooks for various levels. The next is engaging and interesting. The textbooks should be engaging. It should have attractive layout. It should have various kind of activities which the children can practice. And then it should also bring in certain real life or context related examples so that they feel more connected to the content that is being present in the textbooks. The textbook also needs to be practical and functional. It should support the skills that we are talking about in our learning outcomes for a particular age group. It should also give us opportunity to actually carry it around. It should not be very heavy and bulky. The textbooks should also address the inclusive and culturally sensitive aspect. It should always respect diversity. It should avoid using bias, and also there are certain language terms or certain use of language which highlight bias. We should try to avoid it. The language of the textbooks should not have any bias, and it should be relevant to the learners in our classroom. So it has to be well designed and durable. It should be easy to read. It should have good font size, and it should not be very bad material that it withers off very quickly, because the learner will be using the textbooks on and off every day in the classroom. And we should also give them opportunities to solve certain worksheets in the textbook itself. So these are some of the characteristics of a good textbooks. Moving on, now we will look at some of the previous year questions which has come based on the topic that we have just discussed, that is teaching learning materials. The first question is, a teacher Amrita uses various tasks such as creating charts, graphs, drawing, gathering information and presenting them through pair or group work. This differentiated instruction is a way of demonstrating her own knowledge, only helps the bright learners, is the best way to prepare students for an assessment. This will help learners with multiple intelligence to perform well and learn better. So we were discussing that various learners in our classrooms have various learning style and preferences. Some of them are auditory learners, some of them like or are learn better with visuals, some of them are kinesthetic learners. So when you try to relate that particular concept to the question in front of us, we can easily remove some of the options. This is not a way for the teacher to demonstrate her own knowledge. So the first option is gone. We would never only help the bright learners. We are trying to talk about inclusive education, which means we should try to make sure that all of our learners feel included and we are giving personal attention to all of them. So the first and second option can be removed. The third one is talking about specifically assessment. So the TLMs are not generally used only for assessment. It is more talking about the teaching learning process and the whole experience of learning a concept and how it will support what the teacher is teaching, and it will help the learners to learn better. So the right answer here would be option 4. It helps learners with multiple intelligences to perform well and learn better. Now the next question is, an activity asks students to determine from a list of possible answers with a title what kind of information will appear in an input text before an audio recording is played. Here students are filling in missing information, actively predicting the content of the input, checking for facts, guessing answers to the question. So now you need to read what is being done in this particular activity carefully. So the students are to determine from a list of possible answers with a title what kind of information will appear in the input text before an audio recording is played. So all of this is happening before the audio is being played. They are just having a title and some of the information that will appear later on. So based on this, what the child can do? The child can, the options here are filling in missing information, actively predicting the content of the input, checking for facts, guessing answers to question. So here the child will actively predict the content of the input because the audio is yet to be played and the child is predicting based on the information that they already have. Now let us look at the next question. How does computer technology support language learning in classes 5th and 6th to enhance accuracy in students' writing? Now they're talking about writing skills here and also how computer technology will support language learning in classes 5th and 6th. So the options in front of us are rapid drill work, detailed error feedback, spelling and grammar checking, formatting and font designs. So when you look at these 4 options, there are only 2 major options which are addressing the writing skills. And when it comes to computer technology support language, this is a very simple question in front of us. So the right answer here would be detailed error feedback. So the child will keep on receiving a detailed feedback on his or her work, which will help them to work on it and learn better. Moving on to the next question. While teaching a one-act play, a tableau can be used as one of the teaching strategies. The tableau refers to. So this is a particular TLM or a learning resource which we use in a classroom. This comes under a visual kind of TLM. So the options are a silent still image made by actors posing as characters, a monologue, some musical instrument, dialogues between different actors. If we see here, we are talking about a one-act play. So, will we only have a monologue? Will we use some musical instrument? So, you can easily make out that these 2 options don't seem appropriate. Now we are to see between the first option and the fourth option. When it comes to a tableau, it is basically an image or a still of a particular ongoing act. So based on the act, we will ask our students to see what is happening and then try to recreate it. Imagine, use their imagination of what the dialogues would be like between these characters and then work on it. So the right answer here would be silent still image made by actors posing as characters. The next question is, a good language textbook should include interesting stories, attractive fonts, illustrations, and learner-friendly, extracts from British and American literature, and more grammar exercises. So from these 4, which are certain things that a good language textbook will have? Like we were discussing, what are the various principles or key characteristics of a good textbooks, on what basis or what goes into planning or developing of a good English textbook or language textbook. So the right answer here would be the one which is trying to cover most of the aspects of the good language textbooks. So option 2 is the correct answer here. You can easily rule out all the other options. Interesting stories does seem like an appropriate answer here, but it does not cover all the aspects. We have the second option, which is making sure that it is covering all the aspects here. The next one, extracts from British and American literature. This is not required. More grammar exercises. It should include exercises, but only on grammar. That will not be the right answer here. So with this, we come to the end of this particular topic. Now we will move on to another topic which is very important. So now we discuss the TLMs, the teaching learning process. So when the teaching learning process has occurred, now we need to see how these learning outcomes are being achieved, how well we are able to teach these concepts, and how can we assess and put values to it. So the next aspect that we will look into is evaluation. So what is evaluation? Evaluation is basically a process of collecting, analyzing and interpreting information to make judgments about learning and as well as get feedback on the teaching. So what it does is it will help us to understand how well this teaching methods or approaches are working and how well the children are able to learn, to what extent they are able to reach their learning outcomes. So why it is important for us to evaluate? It will give us feedback and later on we can improve our learning. So then it will also tell us about students' progress and also help us to identify certain areas where the children need more help from the teacher. So evaluation acts as a guide for better teaching, for continuously supporting learning and growth among our learners. So now we will look into specifically CCE. Continuous and comprehensive evaluation. This is a very important term that we use in NCERT textbooks and also CBSE has come up with it. This basically is a holistic system of assessment. We realized that one year end evaluation or one year end test cannot tell us the true potential of a child. And after that, on the principle that children can excel in various fields or various domains of learning, not just the cognitive aspects. So we included holistic system of assessment that will focus on the overall development of learners rather than just final examination. So to understand CCE, it is basically a learner-centric approach to evaluation. It assesses both. It will not just assess the scholastic aspect, it will also address the various co-scholastic aspects of the learner. It uses a variety of tools and techniques over a period of time. So the very word continuous and comprehensive, it is done continuously throughout the academic year. Every other day there will be certain assignments, there will be certain discussions which will help us understand our learning and also teaching in a better manner. And it will be comprehensive. It will not just assess one single domain of learning, it will address the various domains of learning. And it will help us or promote regular feedback, and it helps thereby in improving our teaching learning process, and ultimately it aims at holistic development of our learners. So the key objectives of continuous and comprehensive evaluation is to make sure overall development of the learners. So it will address the cognitive, affective and psychomotor development of the learners. It will also identify individual strength and areas which need improvement. Because now we are not just addressing the cognitive aspect, we will try to see these learners are good in which other areas, and then in which areas they are lacking. So if we identify those areas, we can help them improve or learn better. And it will continuously provide us with feedback for both improving learning and teaching. It also encourages and has aspects of self-assessment and peer assessment, which will make learner more responsible of their own learning experiences and take responsibility when it comes to reaching certain level of learning. It promotes co-scholastic development and holistic growth of every learner, as it will not be confined to only cognitive aspects. The learner will be able to move on and do more. Coming to the next part, evaluation of listening skills and evaluation of reading skills. So now when it comes to language learning, we try to see proficiency in these skills. So the evaluation of listening skill, what we need to evaluate? We need to evaluate that main ideas, whether the specific information was picked up, whether the sequence of the events are understood or not. Are you able to remember it in the right order? What is the purpose and tone and attitude of the speaker? And how well are you able to infer the information that you are listening to? And also, if there are various instructions that are given, how do you follow them? So various tools and techniques that we can use in our classrooms or activities which we can plan for evaluating listening skills can be listening to passages. So after the child has listened to it, you can make sure that you assess or ask questions on it to check how much they have listened to or understood. We can also use audio and video clips. We can make sure that the child takes note, so their note taking skills can be assessed. We can also give them various MCQs or filling certain gaps based on the sequence of events that have happened. So the child will recall whatever they have heard and then do these tasks. Now coming to the evaluation of reading skills. So it becomes very difficult for us to evaluate reading skills in the proper manner, because reading skill does not just include reading it out loud. It also includes the aspect where how much of the comprehension has happened. So now what to evaluate? We should evaluate the specific details, whether the vocabulary, the interpretation and inference that the child is taking from the text is correct or not, the author's purpose and the viewpoint. And reading also has the aspect of critical thinking. After we have read and comprehended, how are we critiquing this particular text that is in front of us? So what are the various tools and techniques that we can use? Reading passages, unseen passages, seen passages. The teacher can ask various MCQ questions, short answers, and also ask them to paraphrase or tell us in their own word of what they have understood or summarize the text that they have just read. It will also help us to match various groups after we have read. So, identifying key concepts and their key characteristics and then matching them. The children can also read, think about it, and then they can share and have a discussion in the classroom. So, the key takeaway will be we need to understand what is their understanding, identify their strengths and gaps, and also support them to learn better. Now, when it comes to evaluation of reading skills and evaluation of writing skills, we need to make sure, as we discussed about the reading skills, when it comes to writing skills, what do? We try to see what is the content, what are the ideas that the child is having, how it has organized it in a coherent manner, what is the vocabulary and the word choice, the grammar structure and the sentence structure, what is the spelling and punctuation. So these things become important when you are trying to evaluate the writing skills. What are the various tools and techniques? We can give them various writing assignments like a paragraph writing on a certain topic, essay writing, letter writing, email writing, and writing various kind of emails or letters like formal, informal, because the kind of vocabulary and tone while writing we will use and the punctuation or grammar that we use when we are writing a formal letter is different to writing an informal letter. We can also ask the students to develop stories based on certain key points, or we can show them an image and ask them to think or write a story about what they see. We can also use various rubrics in order to assess writing skills. We need to give specific description on what basis this evaluation will happen so that the children also know the expectations that are being given to them. The next is peer and self-assessment. So children can exchange their work and also give feedback on each other's writing skills. Another skill that is very important is the speaking skill. So how well a child speaks. What we need to evaluate is their intonation, their pronunciation, the variety of words that they use, how well they are using, and how are they presenting the ideas. Are they presented in a coherent manner? Is it easy for the listener also to understand? And how they change the language usage based on the change in the context. And then what are the various activities? We can ask the children to come forward and do an extempore. We can give a topic and ask them to prepare and come to speak on it. We can ask them to give various speeches. So all of these things will become important when we are talking about evaluation of the speaking skill. So now let us look at some of the previous year questions that have come in our CTET examination. So the first question in front of us is, which of the following statement is true? All formative tasks are meant for assessment. Formative assessment, to be effective, must be conducted only after teaching a lesson. While all formative tasks are meant for improving teaching learning, some are used for assessment too. Formative assessment helps us to grade students into good, average, and poor. So when we were discussing about continuous and comprehensive evaluation, there are two important kinds of assessment that we need to remember. That is formative assessment and also summative assessment. Formative assessment and summative assessment are a part of continuous and comprehensive evaluation. So coming to what is formative assessment? Formative assessment is the assessment that is conducted during the learning process in order for us to get feedback and also have improvement of learning. So that is the major objective. And then it is conducted during the learning process as in when we are teaching various learning concept. So this will help us to give feedback on our teaching practice and improve as and when it is needed. And also it will help us to identify what are some areas that our children are finding difficult to understand. Thereby we can give more inputs on that aspect. So this is formative. When it comes to summative assessment, these are the assessment which are conducted at the end in order for us to make sure and understand how much of the learning outcomes the students are able to achieve. We try to see throughout the process or throughout the academic year, whatever they have learned, how they are able to put forward and express and show us. So this will help us to categorize and give them a grade, or also give them at what level they are coming when it comes to reaching of their learning outcomes. So to see the question in front of us, formative assessment, whatever options they have given here are true about formative assessment. But when you see the fourth option, does it give grades to the students and also divide them in good, average and poor? That is not an objective of formative assessment. And formative assessment is not just conducted only after teaching a lesson. So the second option also does not seem appropriate. And all formative tasks are not meant for assessment. Some of the formative tasks are done to check how well we are teaching and how well we are also trying to see diagnosis. We are trying to identify some of the areas which the children are finding difficult. So the right answer here will be option 3. All formative tasks are meant for improving teaching learning program or the process, but it is also used for assessment as well. The next question is, a rhetorical question is asked. So we a lot of the times while we are talking to each other, हम कुछ rhetorical questions पूछते हैं. तो ये rhetorical question का objective क्या है, आखिर ये क्यों पूछा जाता है? तो a rhetorical question is asked to gather personal information or to clarify a concept. Next option, for the sake of effect with no answer needed, to get a feedback about what others think about your speech or writing. If you try to understand the three options here, 1, 2 and 4 are actually talking about different kind of questions that we ask in our classrooms and also in our day-to-day life. A rhetorical question is basically a question which is just used to enhance our speaking and give an effect. We are actually not expecting an answer or a response from the listener. This is only a way of us to express our feelings and emotion in that point of time. So the right answer here would be the third option. It is for the sake of effect with no answer needed. Now coming to the next question. What type of questions promote thinking skills in children? So now, if you want to enhance children's thinking skills, what kind of questions you will ask? Will you ask them factual questions? Questions which are based purely on the reading text? Personal response questions? And close-ended questions. So there are 4 kinds of questions that they have put forward in front of us. So the factual questions, it will address just the facts. And if you are asking them questions based on purely on what they have read, they will be coming under the comprehension check. And the next one is personal response question. So this particular kind of questions, they will leave out a lot of space for the students to give inputs of their own experiences. This will be their personal response, their personal learning, and they will think more in order to respond. Close-ended questions, they always make it difficult for us to have that openness to discuss the questions. So the right answer here would be personal response questions. Coming to the next question. Instead of asking questions and getting answer from her learners, a teacher gives some short text and asks her learners to frame questions. Her primary objective is to. So in this particular teaching learning task that we are discussing, so always the teacher is asking questions. So instead of doing that and getting responses from the learner, what the teacher plans to do here is, she is giving them a short text. And then she is asking them to frame questions based on the text that is in front of her. So what is the objective? This is a question related to pedagogy aspect of languages. So let us look at the 4 options in front of us. Take their help during examination. So the teacher is making sure that the questions are generated by the students, and then she will be using it for examination. Make the learners realize the difficulties faced by teacher in preparing question papers, so that the children understand how difficult it is for the teacher to sit and make questions on a particular text. Is that the objective here that the teacher is doing? The next option is enhance learners' analytical and critical thinking. So these are two certain skills, higher order skills, which we are trying to develop in our learners. Will that be an objective here? Now let us look at the 4th option. Train the learners as good question paper setter. So the objective of the teacher is to make the learners make sure that they know what kind of questions they should make in order to prepare a good question paper and ultimately become a good question paper setters. So if we read all the 4 options here well, we can easily make out which is the correct answer here. So the correct answer here is option 3, to enhance the learner's analytical and critical thinking. All the other options can be easily removed and eliminated. Coming to the next question, reading between the lines as a sub-skill of reading mainly involves. So a lot of the times we will ask our students to try to read between the lines. This is a sub-skill of the reading skill. So what are we expecting our students to do here? So the 4 options are understanding the stated facts, giving sufficient space between lines, inferring the unstated using the contextual and verbal cues, identifying the grammatical item. So here the 4 options that they have given us, we can try to rule out whichever is not applicable to the sub-skill of reading between the lines. So the first option which we should clearly rule out as soon as we read it is giving sufficient space between the lines. That cannot be an intention of a reading skill. So we will remove option 2. Now we have 3 left in front of us. Understanding the stated facts. Reading will not just ask us. So this is like talking about comprehension part only. It is not talking about the sub skill which involves for the learner to actually understand and infer what is not directly said in the text. It does not talk about identifying the grammatical item alone. So the right answer here would be for the children to infer the unstated using the contextual and verbal clues. The third option is the right answer. Question number 6. While drafting a notice, students may be instructed to use language. So this is a writing task that we are giving to our students to check on their writing skills. So when you're trying to evaluate their writing skills, specifically you are asking the students to make a notice. So what is the purpose of creating a notice? So a notice is being put at various places or on a notice board for everyone to get a quick glance, and we should give various directions, and the language of it should be in what manner, what the notice is about. When we look at it, we should quickly understand. It should not have a lot of flowery language. It should not be very elaborative. It should not be very descriptive and having a lot of extra information. So the right answer here would be the use of language should be direct. So the students should address directly whatever is the purpose of this notice. Coming to the next question, while assessing a group work, a teacher should not focus on. So there are 4 options here. So when we are trying to see a group activity, we have assigned a collaborative activity between a group of students. So when we have given this, we try to see various aspects of this particular group activity. But what is that we should not focus on? Showing concern for others, cooperative learning process, assessing each child's work, taking initiative in work. So these are the 4 things. So whenever it comes to a group task, what we need to see is how involved all the students are, how they are doing the task together? Are they concerned about the learning of the other learner as well? And who is coming forward and taking initiatives when it is given in the group task? So the right answer, which should not be the focus of a teacher while we are trying to assess a group task, is assessing each child's work. We should not try to assess the child individually when we are trying to focus on different skills which are developed by giving students a group work. So the right answer here is option 3. Moving on to the next question. When learners give feedback on each other's language, work, learning strategies, performance, etc., it is called. So now the learners are getting involved in their own learning process. They are taking more responsibility of their learning. So we were discussing about this in our concept section as well. So what kind of assessment is this? Is it formal assessment? Is it a group assessment? Is it self-assessment or peer assessment? So we were discussing how important it is for the child to be able to have control and also understanding of their own learning and where they stand, where they are lacking. So instead of the teacher always giving feedback, if the learners are giving feedback to each other, they will all learn together in a collaborative manner. So the right answer here will be peer assessment. So now in this section, we have discussed about what are the various TLMs and how the teaching process, learning process works, and what kind of evaluation techniques we should use in order to assess the LSRW skills, and also how evaluation becomes an important aspect of the teaching learning process itself. Now the next part, one of the objective is of evaluation in order for us to know where the children are lacking or to diagnose where they need help and which are some of the hard spots for our students. So when it comes to these, we should be able to identify and thereby help our learners to learn better. Now we will move on to the next part of our session, which is talking about this particular aspect. So the concept is about remedial teaching. So what is remedial teaching? Remedial teaching is additional support given to learners who are struggling to help themselves and also struggling to overcome certain difficulties, and then this is done to help them improve their learning. So some of the key features of remedial teaching are extra help is given to the learners who are in need. It is also a way of giving them individualized and focused support. The aim is to have improvement and success in the learning outcomes of these learners. It also helps us to bridge learning gaps. So when we are talking about learning, we have to make sure that we are able to address the needs of all learners. A lot of the times we are unable to do it in our classrooms. So certain learners or certain individual learners will require more support. That is where remedial teaching comes in. So now, why do learners actually need remedial teaching? They, in order to address the learning gaps in their basic concepts or skills, which is hampering them to improve or learn better in the classroom. Sometimes the children also find it difficult because their pace of learning is different. So when we are teaching in a regular classroom, what we end up forgetting is some of the children may be lacking or they might be finding it difficult to keep up with the content that we are discussing in the class. That is why remedial teaching becomes important. Some children, they need more practice and repetition to understand better. So for us to actually do in a 40-45 minutes classroom becomes difficult. So we need to understand who are these learners who needs little more practice or repetition, and then after identifying them, give them remedial teaching. A lot of the times the learners will know what the right answer is and also know the concepts well, but they will be lacking the confidence to actually participate in the classroom. So for us to be able to help them come forward and make sure that this behavioral issue or these hindrances that they have, this lack of confidence needs to be addressed. So we need to provide them encouragement in order to improve them. They also have different learning needs and sometimes they need additional support. So all of these can be addressed through remedial teaching. Now let us look further in this concept. So what we can do in order to, when it comes to remedial teaching, what are the various things that we can do? We should look into curriculum adaptation. So the curriculum adaptation here means modifying the given content or the material or the assessment that we are following in order to meet the needs of various learners. So what are the various ways to adapt the curriculum? We can do content adaptation. Sometimes the present content is difficult for certain learners. So what we can do? We can simplify, we can reduce and then resequence the content in order for them to understand it better. We should also do process adaptation, wherein we are using various teaching methods and activity based on the needs of the learner. We can also adapt our material. We will use certain specific materials based on what will work with this particular learner, or what will help them to understand or learn better. And then we need to adapt our assessment as well. Only one kind of assessment does not fit all learners, so we need to modify our question. We need to sometimes give them extra time for them to be able to answer the questions, and we should always have options, which means we should look for alternative assessment methods for our learners. So these are some of the curriculum adaptations that we should make when it comes to remedial teaching. So now, what are various remedial teaching strategies? So these are targeted actions or interventions that the teacher designs to help learners overcome their learning difficulties and improve their achievement in the classroom. So some of the strategies will be: first, to identify learning gap through assessment, and after identifying the learning gap, to address it, and also provide individual or small group intervention and support to learners. We also need to reteach concepts by giving more examples, simpler examples, so that the students are able to learn better. We need to give more support and scaffolding. We need to give them more practice exercise when it comes to various concepts. We should also use multisensory and interactive methods and teaching learning materials, so that the more the child interacts with the TLMs, the child will be able to retain that information and learn better. We should also try to give them positive feedback and encouragement, because a lot of the times it is just because of the discouragement or the fear of doing something wrong that the children don't participate or don't actually showcase their skills. So, if the teacher is able to encourage them to participate more, it will benefit the learners and they will come forward and participate in the classroom. So, adapting the curriculum and using effective remedial strategies, it will ensure that the learner gets the support they need in order to learn and succeed in language learning. Now, when it comes to remedial teaching, we can talk about two kinds of ways in which this is provided. One, the teacher is giving the remedial, which is the individualized educational program. So, a lot of the times this individualized educational program, it is a personalized plan. It is designed for an individual student based on their unique learning needs. The key features of this IEP will be based on individual strengths, needs, and learning goals of the learner. It will include specific objectives and strategies. It will have suitable teaching material. It will have various assessment and teaching methods for the learner to improve and learn better. It also involves the teacher, parents, and the learner in planning and reviewing it. So even though the child is having an individualized educational program, this is developed by the supervision of the teacher and also the involvement of parents. In this particular individualized education program, the monitoring is regular, which is leading to better progress among the learners. Another way of providing remedial or support to the learners is by peer support. So, peer support program is also another good strategy. So, this encourages learner to help each other and learn better. So, when a peer is helping the learner, they may not feel awkward, or they may not be scared. A lot of the times the child is scared of the teacher, and because of that the child is not performing well or not asking for doubts. But when they see that their friend or a peer is also ready to help them, they will feel better and more engaged in their learning process. That is why peer support is important. Some of the key features of peer support program are: it promotes collaboration and teamwork, it encourages sharing of ideas and resources. It builds confidence and also communication skills. It will help learners to understand the concepts better by interacting with their peers. And it creates a supportive and inclusive learning environment in which both the learners are being benefited. So this is one of the ways of doing remedial teaching. Moving on, now we will look at some of the questions that have come on this concept. So a student has difficulty in applying the learned knowledge. Example, in word problems, the student also fails to translate sentences into equations or identify the variables. A possible solution to this problem could be: so, whenever the learner is coming across a word problem, it is facing difficulty in applying the learned knowledge. The student is failing to translate the sentences into equation and is unable to identify the variables as well. So, the options in front of us here are allowing more time to complete the same activity, giving them longer duration to address that particular question, giving only simple assignments to boost their confidence so that the child feels better. We will just give them easy questions all throughout and enhance their confidence. The third one, pairing him or her with a high achiever. We will ask for peer interaction and we will ask a high achieving student to help the student who is facing this problem, and giving carefully designed assignment which will move from simpler to complex level. So, like we discussed in our remedial teaching, we need to have certain curriculum adaptation, which also includes adaptations in the assessment practices. So, what we will do is we will take certain concepts, we will start with simplifying the concepts, then we will give them simpler questions, and then move slowly as and when their level, their learning is enhancing, we will move from simple to complex. So the right answer here will be option 4, giving carefully designed assignment from simple assignment, simpler examples to complex examples or complex concepts. Moving on to the next question. Individualized educational programs with intensive support to help students to consolidate their basic knowledge is referred to as. So, when you are giving individualized educational programs, so I told you that this comes under remedial teaching. So, this particular individualized education program, it is actually a very important concept when we are discussing about a seated examination. This will come in various pedagogical aspects of various subjects. We are always trying to enhance the learning of learners by giving them more and more individualized experiences. The 4 options in front of us are advanced study programs, introductory courses, remedial teaching or remedial coaching, and the fourth one, revision sessions. So the right answer here clearly is remedial coaching. That is option 3. Now the next question is a purposeful collection of students' work that demonstrates their efforts, progress and achievement in a given area is called A or AN. Options are assignment, portfolio, checklist and rating scale. So when we talk about assessment of our learners, especially when it comes to continuous and comprehensive evaluation, the formative assessment, there are various tools and techniques that we use. So we are giving our learners feedback all throughout. So there are various kind of tools and techniques that we used, like there is anecdotal records, there is portfolio assessment, there is checklist, there are rating scales available. So when it comes to anecdotal records, these anecdotal records are the ones which we will take and keep certain instances or stories of how the child behaves in various situations and how their learning has progressed, and also highlighting some of the key aspects of their behaviors. That is what anecdotal record will consist of. When it comes to portfolio, it is basically a collection of students' work and how they are progressing in their learning and achievement in a particular area or topic or in a particular class. The next one that we have here is checklist. So checklist will basically assess the presence or absence of certain skills in the learners or not. The next one is rating scale. So we rate the performance of the learner in this category. So the right answer here, which will tell us, it will demonstrate the learner's efforts, their progress, and also achievement in a given area, will be portfolio. So the right answer here is option 2. Moving on to the next question. Giving effective feedback to the learners mean. So if you are giving them an effective feedback, what does it mean? The first option, diagnosing problems and guiding the learners on how to improve, correcting their mistakes in the class, giving appropriate time and space for corrections, focus on positive aspects as well as areas of development. So, when you are giving feedback, there are certain things that the teacher needs to remember. We should be able to give feedback in a way that we are trying to address the problem and not blame the student or discourage the student. So, when you look at the options, that is diagnosing problems and guiding the learners on how to improve, correcting their mistakes in the class. It is okay to correct the mistakes of the learner in the classroom, but sometimes they can get discouraged if they are interrupted again and again and are also ridiculed in front of the whole class. The next is giving appropriate time and space for correction. So you give them a lot more space and time for them to improve by themselves. Focus on positive aspects as well as areas of development. So these are the 4 options. So the right and the most effective way of giving feedback would be the first one, where you have diagnosed the problem and you're trying and guiding the learners how they can improve. You're just not pointing out the errors, you're also telling them how they can improve. So with this, we come to the end of our discussion for today. So in today's discussion, we have addressed some of the major topics when it comes to language paper 1 and paper 2 of seated examination. So in today's discussion, we have seen the teaching learning process, which is talking about the TLMs and how they will help to improve the learning and also enhance our teaching as well. It will make the learning more engaging, relevant and meaningful. We also saw what an effective teacher is like. So that when the teacher is using these TLMs to their benefit, they can showcase their pedagogical skills well. The next aspect after teaching comes is the evaluation. This is to assess the learning of the learners and also to strategically help us to improve on our teaching learning process and also help our learners to improve and identify their shortcomings. So we identify the learning gaps, and then after we have identified, we give them remedial teaching so that they can improve their learning outcomes achievement. So they will have better learning gains, they will understand better and they will be more confident and thereby succeed in the language learning process. So these are some of the important things that we have discussed in today's session. We will be meeting in the next session in order to solve some of the previous year questions. So these are some of the important things that we have discussed today. Try to remember what are the certain keywords when it comes to TLMs, what are the various kinds of TLMs, and how do they actually help the teacher in the teaching learning process and also the engagement of learners. We also discussed about evaluation, the formative and summative assessment, various assessment tools and techniques become very important for us to remember, keeping the seated examination in mind. Then trying to remember what is the intention of remedial teaching and what are the various ways, that also is important, and how this whole process will enhance the learning outcomes of our learner is also important. So try to remember these key points when it comes to the preparation of your CTET examination. We will meet in the next session in order to solve some of the previous year questions of the languages 1 and 2 for both paper 1 and paper 2. Thank you.